Very little is known about Washington and Charlotte Scott's background, besides what's left behind from recorded census records. According to the earliest census record of 1900, Washington was born in 1830 Maryland and Charlotte was born in 1833 Louisiana. Most likely, both were born slaves. At some point, Washington was transported to Louisiana or moved there on his own during the Civil War. The Civil War started on April 12, 1861. Just before the end of the war on August 21, 1864, in New Orleans, Louisiana, Washington Scott joined the U.S. military colored troops. Washington and Charlotte were recorded as married in 1865, but that was only because they were not recognized as a family until 1865. The birth years of their children supports that they met after the Civil War. Their firstborn child was Mack, who was born in 1866, followed by Squire in 1868 and Thomas in 1874. In 1900, Washington and Charlotte were well into their senior years. Washington was 70 and Charlotte was 66 years old. The Census Bureau records every 10 years, and it was not until 1870, and even more true for 1880, that the names of former slaves were finally added to the U.S. Census records. Unfortunately, at this particular time, there is not enough information available pertaining to Washington and Charlotte's life prior to the 1900 census. What is known about the couple is that they lived a full life and that they were a close-knit farming family. Neither Washington or Charlotte could read or write, but they made sure that all three of their children attended school to learn how to read and write. Mack and Thomas became farm owners, while Squire became a preacher. The highest attainable status during this time period for an African American was a teacher, preacher, or a doctor within their own community. They married women who could also read and write, with the exception of Mack. Mack and Thomas's wives were homemakers, while Squire's wife was a teacher. Washington and Charlotte had 15 grandchildren before their passing. Washington died sometime before the 1910 census between the age of 70 and 80. After the death of Washington, Charlotte lived with her son Squire and his family. Charlotte died sometime before the 1930 census between the age of 86 and 96.